Hi, Steve. It's so good to see you.
Hey there, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm great. I'm actually really excited for our conversation.
Me too.
So before we jump in, I want to have you introduce yourself because I know you because I had the privilege of working with you at the agency when I served as the Chief Wellbeing Officer. And I didn't only have the privilege of working with you in one role, I actually was able to work with you in two roles, which was pretty incredible for me. But what I wanted to do was have a conversation with you today, a little bit about that work. And I'll kind of jump into some questions. But before I do, would you mind sharing with the listeners your background, your incredible history with the agency, and also just maybe a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. And it was a pleasure working with you. I'm Steve Hirsch. I worked with the agency for 30 years, and I was in the Army, U.S. Army before that. I'm sort of a little bit different than most people with the agency because I bounced around all over the place. Every couple of years, frankly, I got bored. I have wanderlust. But what that gave me was a really three-dimensional view of the agency. Most people focus on operations or analysis or doing the amazing craft, and there are some amazing people who work there, but I bounced all over everywhere because I wanted to get to know as much of the organization. So I started off as an analyst, but very quickly moved to corporate sorts of jobs where I did things like I was the deputy director of the Diversity Inclusion Office, which of course no longer exists. But there I got to do a lot around accessibility and making the agency's systems, both technical, but also the facilities, more accessible to people with disabilities. Incredible work. Then where I met you, I was the deputy director of the Office of Public Affairs with Director Burns, and they announced that you were starting, so I got to work with you on how we advertise this new focus, an extremely important focus, in my opinion, on well-being and making sure that we're looking out for the whole officer, particularly for an organization like that, where we really push people in times of crisis and taking a step back and saying, no, we care about you. We want to make sure that you are the best that you can be, to use the Army's terminology. So that's where I got to meet you there. And then the job, probably the only job that I actually ever applied for, the rest of the job that sort of got put into, was working as chief learning officer, where, of course, with you, we got to look at all of the learning across the entire agency, everything from, sort of secretarial and facilities management, all the way to deep spycraft. How could we infuse more well-being into all of those operations to make sure that the people who were at the point of our operations were actually in a place where they could do the job that we needed? And then after 30 years at the agency, I decided, you know what? It's been a great job here, but I'm starting to get bored. There's all kinds of great things in the outside world. And so here I am.
You did such a great job. So I want to highlight a couple things because there's many people that are listening to this that have never worked at the agency, right?
Of
So
course.
first, I would just say one of the things I learned when I went to the agency was how many careers you can have within the organization. And your career is a perfect example of that. Like, I just was so amazed. I was like, you really never have to live here. You can have an entire career here for 30 years and really be able to try your hand and learn all different types of professions. So you did that. You're a living example. And then I would also say thank you to you and so many others that helped make sure that the strategy was successful around well-being, because without the internal communications piece, without understanding the value to mission, which is really why we had a CWO and why we had an office focused on this. But also then where I really want to talk to you today about, Steve, was the last role that you had, because I talk a lot to people around how critical it is to build skills and competencies in the area of well-being to achieve peak performance. And that's really what you and I used to talk all about in your last role. So can you share with me a little bit of your own perspective, not only from that role, but really because you have such strong expertise in this area, on what value you think this brings to an organization when they look at well-being as not only, hey, go to the gym, but it's really more around building skills and competencies to help perform mission? Like, what does that mean to you when I say that?
So, spoiler alert, it's critical. It's 100% critical because of the tasks we were asking people at the agency to do. So let me tell you a quick story that I think gets at my philosophy and really sort of defined how I then approached moving on in my career. And this was probably the late 2000s, at a time before we had AI, which is before we had AI largely in the outside world, which is something that's important to understand. So I had been tasked as the agency became wont to do with either shutting down or fixing a broken organization. And they would say to me, Steve, we need you to do that people thing you do, which was always shorthand for it's broken, there's a morale problem. Go do the thing and either get rid of it or turn it around. And the morale was really low. The three different teams really had nothing in common. And what I found was that there was one team that was almost by accident finding really interesting, really interesting insights in this thing called business analytics. They were looking at data in a completely different way, and what they were able to do was track, for example, how many people were reading an article, or how many requests were coming based on something that we had done, right? And so I took a chance. I went to my boss. Again, very short story. What we ended up doing was creating an organization from that one team. But I understood, and my deputy understood from the beginning, that in order for this to be successful, we needed people to truly buy into the mission, but also to experiment, and experiment without this fear of, I've wasted my time, or something didn't work out. Are they gonna ding me? Are they not gonna promote me? How is this gonna look for me? So I created an award for failure, right? Now, I got yelled at for this. I literally got pulled up to the seventh floor of the C-suite of the CIA, and three different offices yelled at me in my face about giving awards for failure. So what I had to explain, of course, was that they really weren't awards for failure. They were awards for the lessons that we learned from those failures, and lessons that then went on to breed success in the projects that we did from that point on. And once you say that, everyone understands. But of course, it's not as pithy as an award for failure, right? But I will tell you what happened in that group, and it wasn't just for the awards for failure. It was for all the work we did in the environment, creating that space. We were booming. I had a literal list, a lawyer's legal pad, because I'm a Gen Xer, right? Written down names from people from every single director who wanted to come work for us because they heard what a great place this was to work. And the agency was absolutely eating up our work, absolutely eating it up. They were using it. They were doing things with it that we never, in our wildest imaginations, thought that they would do, to include briefing it to the director and the deputy director to show how some of our work was playing out, right? And what's extremely rewarding to me was that 15 years later, after I had long gone, I still had people coming to me. I've never worked with these folks. They would come to me and they would tell me, Steve, I want to thank you for creating this organization. I have never worked harder. I've never been more exhausted in my life, and I've never been so thoroughly, incredibly happy in the work that I am doing, because I am free to do what needs to be done, and we are, excuse the term, kicking butt making those things happen. So the answer to your question, and one of the most important things for well-being for me, has always been on creating an environment where people are safe. You can call it psychological safety if you want, but it's taking care of the people and making sure that they know that, no, we actually need you to experiment. That's the thing here. So if you fail and we learn from it, I'm going to reward you. So that then went on to really define how I looked at well-being as something that is absolutely integral across the entire board, because in that role, I also saw that it was actually making sure people were going to the gym, that people were taking a psychological break, stop thinking about that thing, go work out, go to lunch, go get coffee, come back, and now you're refreshed and you can do those things. So when you came on board, I was extremely happy, because it's like now there's somebody else who can officially state, yes, Steve, those things that you have been championing, we can take this to the next level. And thank God you did, because I really think that there was a dramatic effect when we started that program. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. It does. And what I hear from that, and thank you so much, because I think that was a perfect story, is oftentimes we don't think about those subtle things, or even those permissions, as I would call it, that you used a reward program to instill. A permission to really use every aspect of who we are as a human being to drive performance. So you were opening up, if you were saying, hey, look, take a physical break, a psychological break, go to the gym, whatever. That was a physical break from the work, which ended up driving performance levels. Maybe the psychological safety aspect was someone not having any fear or anxiety over experimentation. So that was more on the mental cognitive side, right? Or even the emotional side. And then you even mentioned going to coffee and encouraging that for a break. That's the social aspect. So I think you're spot on, Steve. I think what we tried to do and make sure was really inherent through the entire strategy was around integrating it into the workday rather than seeing it as something separate, which I have also really thought a lot about integration versus implementation. And sometimes, that gets confused, or maybe I think you did a beautiful job explaining how you can really not only reward for doing that, but then also see sustainability in that approach. I want to ask you a very timely question right now, though. So you mentioned AI very briefly, and we are in, the throes of integrating AI into workplaces around the globe. So give me your couple minutes thoughts on AI, and does that actually end up challenging us in this area on human performance? Does it actually springboard us somewhere even further? I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
AI in a minute. I am a believer in AI with a whole lot of caveats. And probably the biggest caveat, I've spoken over the past month alone, I've spoken to law enforcement, government, state and local, federal government. I've spoken with foreign businesses. I've spoken with foreign governments all around. Should we bring AI on board for our learning and development programs? What's fascinating to me is when I ask them, why do you want to bring it on? They say, essentially, my words, not theirs, we needed to do the AI thing. But what is that? Do you have a strategic plan for AI? And they almost never do. They just are afraid of falling behind their competitors, right? And for law enforcement, competitors are frankly criminals and people who are seeking to do harm to others. The next problem that I see, and this is almost universal, and then frankly, this was something that we had to grapple with back at our former employer, and that is, are we preparing our workforce for the AI tools we're bringing on? It is stunning to me how almost universally every organization, colleges, universities, government, all of them, and especially private organizations, private companies, just assume people know how to use these tools as if by magic, right? No one is training them with simple things like prompting. Every time I bring up, do you have prompting classes that would help your people use the systems better? And they're like, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. So the big headline, though, is I think AI, obviously, it's one of the biggest changes to learning and development since, frankly, the internet. But I don't think it's for the reason people think. And most of the people focus on AI's ability, in my opinion, to replace instructors, to replace adult educators. I don't think that that's the place where AI is ultimately going to be. AI has an amazing ability to personalize learning, right? And that's where I would love to see AI get more specifically used. So what are the things that Jennifer Posa specifically needs from something? What are the things that Steve Hirsch specifically needs from something? AI can tailor those things with case studies that better suit your learning, your certain learning infrastructure, or better my learning infrastructure. And ultimately, I would love to get to a place, this is sort of maybe not so much science fiction, maybe science fact, we're getting towards fact, and that is training learning should be more like a flight simulator than sitting in a classroom with 100 people, with somebody droning on and on with death by PowerPoint. Something that's saying to you, this is how you're going to have to use this thing. Right now, today, AI can write incredible case studies, drawing on the entire history of the world. It's stunning, right? But I don't think we're using it in that way. We keep thinking about how can I make my systems more efficient? And by the way, it can do those things, but I would love to see learning and development organizations in particular looking at how can we get at the very specific needs of this particular person or this particular population so that they actually learn. And the last thing, and I'm particularly hearing this from colleges and universities as they struggle with this AI thing, it is, what exactly do you want your person to take away from the training and learning that you provide them? If you're teaching a class at a college, what are the things you want them in their head to walk away from, right? And we really need to think about that, because right now, AI can write your reports, AI can take your tests, AI can do all of these things. But if we focus on what is the takeaway, then I think we can better get to a place where AI can actually help you get the takeaway for the specific population. I can obviously go on and on, so I'm going to be quiet.
No, I mean, I think that's great. So really understanding what's your strategy, what are your goals, right? Is what you first said. Second is, the training, making sure the training, you clearly understand what you're trying to have people learn, but also the lack of training and assuming that somebody has skills to use this new technology, right? And then I think your third point is also really important, but let me just say, can I connect something without, you kind of speaking to this, is not only would we want somebody to really learn and have the goals of what they want to learn, Steve, but wouldn't it be beautiful if the world that we're creating together here is that someone's individual ability to perform at higher levels increase? So if I can ask you, with all of the organizations you're going to help to develop their learning and development strategy with AI, can you make sure that they're considering that people need to be able to perform in better ways at life and in work as they use AI? Because I think if we can put that on the goals and in that strategy, I actually think we'll get exponentially better at building the environments that you started our conversation with. How do we build environments, whether they be learning environments, corporate environments, world environments, where AI can help Steve and Jennifer not only do better work, but have better lives so that we can achieve what we want to do when we're here on this earth? That's what my thought is. How's that for a closer?
It's a great closer, and I couldn't agree more. I think that if we create environments where people feel safe and free to experiment with AI, I think we just
Correct, yeah.
absolutely improve the ability of AI to do that. And I think we're in a place where particularly local, state, and law enforcement organizations are very leery of it, and they don't feel safe. How do we move them to a more safe place? So that was a great way to bring you full circle. Bravo.
Yeah. Okay. Well, until the next time, this has been awesome to have a conversation with you. And thank you for bringing us into what it is I think everyone's talking about as well with AI. So, so good to see you. And until the next time.
Take care.